Welcome to the night where the paranormal unite. A party like never before under the moon's airy light. The vibe is dark, the air is cold, spirits taking flight. Get haunted and ghost a magazine leading the fright. Ghosts and ghouls dancing hand in hand, lost souls roaming the haunted land. On the battleship New Jersey we gather with glee. Horror and paranormal, a sight to see.
Hey, good evening, everybody.
Hey.
Welcome to the newest episode of Get Moderated with myself, Ian Murphy, the moderator, and Julie Rose of Garden Tarot. And
Garden forever.
And the Tuesday night chakra talk. So thank you all for coming out. What's up, Julie?
Oh, nothing.
I wanted to let everybody know that I personally am running on some steam tonight. So I probably am not going to have the same level of energy I normally do. So thank you for your patience and thank you for joining in. Julie and I both kind of fuming, not fuming, but running on those fumes tonight. She's doing it because she's on this healthy kick where she's able to do a million different things all week and on her journey. Me, just because I think my fuel tanks ran empty today and I don't know why. But thank you, Damien, for joining. And we have Stacy over there first, again, an hour before the show, first to comment over on YouTube. So tonight, obviously, with us being a little bit low energy, I kind of want to take the responsibility off us just a hair for piloting this spaceship through the interwebs. Just let you guys know we're really here to talk about whatever you want tonight. So we don't have a super big agenda, but one thing before we get started, I do want to put it out there. Happy birthday, Rob, one of the founders of Get Haunted. He is celebrating his happy day today, and we are all thankful for you. Hope you had a wonderful day, man. So, Julie, your chakra journey's been going pretty well.
Oh, yeah.
There, right?
Yeah, we're on hot chakra week. That's why I got the green light in the background.
Oh, okay. All right.
Chakra heart is green. And yeah, I can't believe it's flying by. So we're in our 4th week right now.
That's amazing.
Crazy.
So I just went green for you too.
Oh, almost like St. Patrick's Day. No,
I feel like that's a completely different journey.
Yeah, that's a whole nother realm. But yeah, it's been really well, and I'm enjoying doing the lives and then putting updates every day on the group page, which kind of motivates people and gives them insights into the hot chakra, different things you can do. I was driving to work. I got a second job. And it's at a coffee shop, and it's like, 6 a.m. I'm listening to these affirmations. I'm like, I am love. Love is all around me. I feel like, someone was seeing me. They're probably like, what the hell? But it works.
Well, no, I mean, it's honestly those kind of things. Well, it looks like I'm in the Matrix. We all are. We could definitely talk about the surrealism of life and how we might just be in a hologram. We might just be living in a simulation, and how there's a statistical probability, actually a staggering statistical probability, that we are in a simulation. But Corinne Bard,
that's
Ireland,
my
is
sister.
where Halloween originated.
That's my sister. Hi, Corinne.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Hey, Courtney, Damien, Corinne, thank you. Stacy, as always, thank you. Kim, thank you for hopping on. Hopefully Benny was easy to get to bed tonight. So as you're moving through and you're kind of experiencing paranormal on a larger scale, right? Like you're interacting with the community on a much bigger level. How has that been for you? Like, I know there's a lot of folks that are just getting into like podcasting. We have a ton of people over on the Get Haunted Network that are either new shows, expanding their shows, developing their shows, growing them. What's been your experience so far?
Oh, it's been wonderful. I absolutely love being a part of the Get Haunted Network and just seeing everybody's putting out their passions in their different projects and connecting with different people. I actually got to go on Danny's show on
Saw
Sunday.
that.
It
Yeah.
was amazing. I was with the whole crew on there, and it
Oh
was
yeah,
so
you guys
much
had like I
fun.
think 6 or 7 people on there, right?
Yeah, and we were diving into the kind of spooky tarot. When people see it, they get kind of scared, but we were sharing all our different points of views. It was so great, and I really appreciate her, and I love her energy, and it was nice to be and everybody else on there too. They're all part of the Get Haunted crew, and it was just awesome. And I'm hoping next year we all can meet in person.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of meet in person, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't at least mention what was going on this weekend. Obviously,
Yeah.
we at Warner Paranormal have an event going on up in Proctor, Vermont, up at Wilson Castle. We have the Bash at Wilson Castle, 5th annual.
Wilson.
All of us will be there. So myself, Julie. I don't think Russ is going to be able to make it this year. Who's another podcaster, Compass of Curiosities. If you catch his show, he'll be coming back on here in the next couple of weeks. And then, of course, Matt Warner, the lovely Kimberly Murphy, Nicole St. Germain will be there. Quite a few folks from the Warner Paranormal group. And then also you have the soiree. You actually have the supernatural soiree, which you saw the intro video for, right? With Rob and Sarah putting that together, and honestly, I got to imagine it's pretty wild for them right now. Birthday week leading into an absolutely insane event. Nope, not Warner Paranormal Explorers, Courtney. It's Preservation Society. But yeah, I mean, it's such a huge weekend coming into Halloween, right? There's so many different events going on. I'm just thankful no one in my circles wants to go to Salem.
I already went last month, and it was insane in September.
I cannot stand Salem in October. The whole month of October, that city is absolutely dead to me. It's such a zoo.
Well, it's so crazy because I was looking at, I've gone every year to Salem in October from like a teenager to my mid 20s. And I was looking at pictures, and there wasn't really, it was crowded, but not like it is now. It's nothing. It's changed. I want to say over the past 5 years, where maybe social media, TikTok, and things like that have really blown it up even bigger than it's been ever. So now it's
Yeah,
like compact. So I like the spring, but I've never been in the winter. So I'm thinking about going back in the winter.
it's brutal. So we went last year, I think, in like late November, and it
Oh,
was
was it nice
just
then?
it was
So
nice in that there was like no people.
that's what I mean.
Um,
That's what I mean.
it was horrifyingly frigid.
Oh,
So
cold out. Yeah.
Salem, when there are no people blocking the streets, is this. I mean, it is a very drafty city
Oh,
or town, and so the wind whips through pretty aggressively in Salem when there's no bodies to block it.
that's
But I think the wife and I went out. The last time we went to Salem in October was probably like 2008. I think 2009. I think we had just moved back up to Massachusetts. Um, yeah, Russ, late April's good. The chills come off the air a little
yes,
bit.
that's my favorite time, Russ. I
Um,
love the spring.
and it's such a great town and at the off seasons, right? And there's so much history there. There's so many good museums and interesting facts. Yeah, don't come to Maine. It's cold here. Yeah. So
I'm coming.
I
I want to live in Maine.
yeah, you get Maine disease.
Yeah.
Um,
Be up there. I'll be in the
but
woods. I'll be like, there's that witch in the woods. It's me.
well, what I think is really funny is so much of the mythos and the legends and the really falsehoods that are told about the Salem witch trials across the country. And then you go to Salem and you experience some of the museums, you see some of the information and things like that. Like one of the things I always found really interesting is even growing up in Massachusetts, being in relative close proximity um, to Salem, right? Um, the idea of witch burnings, right?
Yeah.
Like growing up until I was in my adulthood, I was under full indoctrination that we were burning witches
Oh
in
man.
Massachusetts, right? We were doing witch burnings, and it was something that was very heavily part of the Salem witch trials and things like that. But then you grow up, you find out a little bit of the history, and you find out that no, there was never a witch burned in Massachusetts. The only witch burnings that actually occurred were like two over in Spain during the Inquisition. And so it's not even really a real thing. It was a highly fictionalized, um, highly sensationalized Hollywood story. It wasn't actually historically based on anything except for something a few hundred years before even the witch trials.
Oh,
So that,
totally. And then you go to the King Richard's Fair. I remember when I was a kid, I don't know if they still have the torture chamber, but they kind of show the reenactment
yeah,
of the Inquisition when you're there. You're like, oh, in Cava, it's there.
yeah, yeah, and so it's so weird to be in a place so steeped in the histories, right?
Yeah, it's cool.
And so I think a lot of it too, uh, especially when we start talking about like the paranormal and some of the weird stuff, we're over in the Bridgewater Triangle,
Yep.
right, which is a pretty popular cryptid and unexplained phenomena area.
Yeah.
And to have this much exposure to these type of things, I think is really gives you a very different perspective
Yep.
on a lot of the things other people say, right? Like, so, to Corinne's point, Puritans, right? Like they were the most religiously fervent individuals. They were the strictest. They were the most, I guess, dogmatic would be a
Right.
good word for it. So much so that, I mean, truthfully, the colonies were founded by people that were so radicalized in their strictness of faith that they were kicked out of Europe. Right? It wasn't like
No,
the
they
rest of
said they're
Europe was
crazies
like,
over here. I'm not saying they're crazy, but to them they were.
well, I mean,
Yeah.
you look at where we are now, and it's not a far cry. I think the evolution of crazy is a pretty good description of the U.S. in general, right? Like, um, but to have that level of strictness and that level of dogmatic and dedication and extremism in faith to then fold into um like the witch trials and ghosts and things like that, um I find it terribly interesting because really New England, I would think, outside of some southern states that are really entrenched in things like voodoo and Creole shamanic practices and things like that, are
Yeah.
some of the most um, superstitious folks that you'll find. Like New England is littered with superstition,
Yeah, and
and
it's interesting because I don't know why this reminds me because H.P. Lovecraft, how he was in Rhode Island.
yeah,
And it's all and a lot of his stories are like cult classics now made into movies and a lot of obviously we have a lot of stories throughout the whole United States, but I feel like New England itself has that creep vibe where we
but I mean that was the vibe that has not only fed L. Ron Hubbard,
yes.
Lovecraft, and Stephen King, right? Like,
Stephen King, oh my, how
so,
can we even forget? He's like right
um,
there. He's over there. He's
yeah,
behind
and
us.
so a lot of the superstition and spiritualism and I guess paranormal, right,
Yeah.
of New England, I it's an interesting dynamic to have such a faith as Puritans to come over here and
Right.
establish the colonies, to then incidentally create one of the most contrary personal belief systems, right? Where like you have an abundance of people that believe in ghosts, you have an abundance of people
Right.
that believe in cryptids, you have an abundance of people that believe in luck, curses, the supernatural, and things like that, which were quite the antithesis of what the Puritans actually were coming
Oh,
here for.
100%.
The idea of a tarot reader, that, I mean, that was
I
that
know.
was a horrific offense according to the Puritans,
Oh
right? That
yeah.
was so it's just really funny that it's so abundant here.
And it's
Um,
accepted too on some states still maybe in the middle of the United States, they're more strict with things like that. And, I get it, but also, I don't know. Also, I
well,
don't know.
but it's a weird dichotomy too, I think, because if you were to just as like my father is, I use an example only because he's one of the more like traditional mindset folks that I've ever known. Um, if you asked him if ghosts existed, he'd be like, "Nah, ghosts don't fucking exist. None of that fucking. That's
Mm,
all bullshit, right?"
yeah.
But he'd be the first to be like, "Oh, that's probably a ghost."
Oh, right.
In the
Yeah.
same, like in the same conversation, he would absolutely say like, "Oh yeah, that was definitely a ghost,"
Well,
and
I
he would
feel like
mean
the
it.
more you're exposed to things too, and you have more experiences, you can't explain things. It kinda
Yeah.
opens you up to new possibilities.
Yep. Yeah, no, and I think that that's a really good point too, is the exposure and saturation of it, right? Like, I think one of the things for me, like when I do investigations, when I encounter spirits or whatever like that, I'm never off put, right? Like I am not one that like hears a voice or a footstep or something move and I jump and run out of the room and I'm freaked out. That isn't who I am. I also grew up with like trying to explain to my family, like, hey, there's this person that stands in my doorway almost every night.
Right.
Um, like I see them clear as a bell, and the moment I get up, they're gone, right? Like the moment I try to go investigate it, they're gone. You know, weird things have happened around me, and I've got some like phenomenal, just weird stories that we've all kind of accredited to my uncle, who passed uh, the 6 months, 7 months before I was born.
Oh,
Um, and so when I'm out investigating, it's very natural, right? Like it's not frightening. It's
I
not,
feel that way too. I'm actually, waiting I'm expecting something to happen, so when if it does happen, I'm just like, "Oh, I that was supposed to happen." Like,
yeah, like
you
right.
know?
Like it's you're not startled by something because
No,
there's
you're not
not
supposed to run 'cause you
that.
don't wanna fall down and hit your head.
Yeah, like I think that for that situation, right? Like when you go to when you go to a situation and you already have an idea of what the outcome is supposed to be, it's much harder to be startled or freaked
Right.
out or
Yeah.
reactionary to it. Um,
I
you
a
know, there's
lot of times,
been
I'll just go into dark rooms and places and houses. I'll literally just sit there and stand people think I'm crazy. I'll just walk
I was
my
just gonna
friend
say
Jason.
that's got to be incredibly creepy. Like
Oh, yeah,
Julie's just like,
I
oh,
was
there's a dark
actually
room. I'm gonna go
I was
sit
an
in.
intern at, some medical place. I was being a medical assistant, and I remember it was an old building, and I went in the basement, I shut all the lights off where all the files were, and I swear, thank God no one came down there, but I stood there for, like, 10 minutes waiting for something to touch me. It's like kinda preconditioning yourself
Yeah,
to it. I don't know why, it's thrilling to me to do that. Like, I'll walk around the campground with in pitch dark, and I'm always like, other people are gonna see me and be like, "Who the hell is that?"
yeah, and that's Denise. That's actually a good question. Did they develop superstitions or adapt to the new environment that made them develop those superstitions? Right.
Ooh, yes.
Um,
I like that.
well, I think you know, not to get too subjective on unconfirmed history, right? Like not to like make wild assumptions about things that I'm not terribly versed in, but a lot of the superstitions and a lot of the different things that carry over into modern day New England superstitions and New England supernatural beliefs, I feel like we're actually carried over from the things that the Puritans were actually trying to get away from, right? I think that there was definitely some latent beliefs that may not have been accepted or acknowledged.
Mm.
And then when they got here and were confronted by certain things, they percolated back up. I don't think that they were necessarily absent when they arrived. I think that they may have just been kind of pushed down by this, like, the Bible will protect me kind of mentality.
But wasn't there already obviously native people already living here as well, and they had their own beliefs and
Yeah.
their own experiences?
Yeah, you had the Wampanoag tribe, you had,
Yeah.
was it the Wampanoag, the Wapatuket, the Cochise, um,
So much history already here
there's
before
so
they
many
even
different
step foot. Right.
tribes, yeah, and they all had stories in the land, and I mean, the Bridgewater Triangle, for instance, like, that area, and especially in some of the swamplands, were already, um there was already belief systems around those areas, right?
Yeah,
There was
and I feel like all the
already some things
intention they put
happening.
into it too. They, they with their spiritual practice and all the things that they've done, they infuse these intentions in the land. So maybe it contradicted the Puritans and caused, even just energetically a different energy.
Yeah, well, and two, this kind of goes back to some of the points I've made in previous shows and previous conversations where I personally believe that it's about pouring energy into a location, right? Or pouring energy
Yeah.
into a site. And so what may start off as an urban legend or a myth with enough energy and enough belief in that myth, right? certain things I think can manifest. And so it's not necessarily that you're creating something from nothing, but with enough energy being directed to a place or a site or a building or an object or things like that, it opens the door for things to actually push through, right? Like it
100%, like a
diminishes the
poltergeist in
veil.
a way, like almost like a poltergeist, especially if it's people or humans all projecting their energy and thoughts at once.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and that's, but to kind of go back to it, yeah, oh, the Pugwai. Yeah, oh, the Pugwudgies.
Jeez.
Yeah, which I think are like one of my favorite cryptids,
I
especially in
like
New
them too.
England.
They're funny, like
Well,
little. They're almost like
supposedly
fairies,
they're
but
pretty
they're not.
damn cute. Yeah, I mean, they look
Yeah,
like little fairy versions of porcupine. Um, However, they're like incredibly hostile.
right.
So, but
I know.
that too, I think, is a very Northern European perspective, right? Where like the Fae and fairies are all malicious, they're
Mm.
all malevolent. There is no like, it is just their nature to take advantage of humanity. And so, like, they're the reverse Sour Patch Kids. I don't know. They might taste sweet. Catch one and fry one up maybe
Well,
one
and
day.
you know what's interesting too, though? Like this time of year in general, from like September to probably the end of the year, January, it's just packed full of spiritual energy. All the holidays, all different religious, different spiritual things, the harvest. It's just a time of year, and so I feel like it actually triggers these things out in nature and in the paranormal world even more. Personally, that's how I feel.
Well, so I agree with that entirely. Maybe for slightly different reasons, right?
Okay.
Um, so I've always been of the mindset that the turning of the year, the turning of the seasons, right, is
Mhm.
from winter to spring is death and rebirth, right?
Yes.
Um, and so it's essentially like, to put it into kind of contextual terms that people might understand, I think a lot of the reason why in the winter, right, especially, um, folks tend to notice things more, feel things more, things like that, twofold. One, we are in the phase of essentially death and dying, right? Winter is the age of hibernation and the passing of the old leaf to the new, right?
Yeah.
And so we are in the age of death, right? Like that is the time of death, which is winter. But so our natural senses and our perceptions are more tuned to that, right? It would be wildly beautiful to see a flower, a tulip push through the snow and bloom in a field of snow, right? Like that would be an absolutely amazing thing. But you fast forward 6 months, 7 months, and you just see a flower in a field, and it's like, oh shit, all right, there's a flower in the field. Um, so our senses are more in tune with life in non-traditional ways in the winter.
Oh, totally. And I have this book called Nature Speaks. It's an amazing book. It talks about each season and its spiritual significance. And they talk about winter being actually the most spiritual time of year for us because when you're in nature at that time, think about it, you can see through the leaves, you can see all the
Mhm.
forest, there's nothing hiding. It's quiet, the snow. It's very, instead of everything happening within the spring or fall or summer, it's a period where you can actually kind of get clarity. It's very straightforward when you think about it. That,
Yeah, and so I also think to compound on that, right? To compound on that energy and that
yeah.
perception, is I look at it almost like an annual budget.
Mhm.
It sounds super weird, right?
No.
Like to put it into financial terms, but that's how my brain works.
Yeah.
So if you've ever dealt with like a corporate budget or you've dealt with like a government budget or anything like that, or you've listened to politics in the US, right? At the end of the year, when budget time comes, right? At the end of the fiscal year, you have to spend as much as possible so that you can have a higher budget or at least maintain your budget the next year. And
Mhm.
so at the end of the year, if the energy for the supernatural really does come from us, and and us pouring energy and thought and mindset into it, right? Why wouldn't there be this kind of like end of year push at the renewal period to
Mm,
remind everyone, to remind everybody that has an influence in the area around them about things that do require their attention to exist or do require their attention to manifest? So it's kind of like a larger push, right?
yeah,
Um, Damien asks, do you believe in the temperature affects spirit energy? Um,
I believe that they affect.
Water molecules, spirits can react more if you blow up an air bubble underwater using sound to produce light. So blow up water molecule with energy so it could produce light. You can see them. I mean the amount of energy you actually have to have and the amount of pressure you have to have underwater for air and sound to actually generate light is pretty significant. I don't know that in our ambient pressure zone that would even be feasible. But I do think that, I mean, well, here's a fact, right? Heat is energy. So if something is absorbing or consuming that energy, heat's going to go down. And so in that regard, I kind of feel like, yeah, like I do think that coldness can be a sign of something absorbing energy. Do I think it's necessarily a presence? No. Do I think that that things can manifest in heat or cold differently? I don't really think so. I think that has more to do with who's there to interact. And sometimes heat is just an easy energy source to kind of amplify what they're trying to do or establish their presence. Julie, what do you think?
Well, I feel like you're dead on what you're saying because I felt like a hand on my like leg before, and it felt like really warm, like that heat. It's almost like they're using the heat or cold to for like to touch you to make you know that they're there, and especially when you're in a more like a controlled environment, like maybe a room, not like outside or whatever, and it happens and there's no vent or AC or heat source, that's when you're like, okay. And then if you have a third person or other person, three maybe, experience the same thing, that's when you're like, oh, okay, this is not just your body having a hot flash or something like that.
Yeah.
Which I think is, I like all the scientific parts of it and all like that, but with our bodies as the equipment is my favorite because that's your intuition, that's your gut
Oh, then
feeling.
you're going to be on Danny's show a lot for sure.
Oh yeah,
I will say Denise has put forward an absolutely phenomenal theory. I don't know if she understands the implications of this. In my brain, thinking about it, Santa comes in winter. I would actually say winter would come because of Santa. If Santa is just a ghost ripping as much energy as humanly possible out of the ambient air, that's why he can fly. That's why he can manifest. That's why he can make presents. It's because he is just stealing every ounce of warmth from the planet as he circles it, right?
well, what's interesting too about the whole thing about, all right, we celebrate the new year in January. To me, that makes no sense at all. That doesn't make sense to me. I think it's just, these people before I passed, we just decided to, I feel like for me, the new year starts in the spring.
Well, so just so you know, too, that's actually at the fault of the Gregorian calendar,
Oh, great.
right?
Oh, yes.
So when the Gregorian calendar was actually established, one, it replaced a 13-month cycle with this 12-month cycle that we have now. It replaced, I believe it was a 6-day week with the 7-day week. And
Yep.
so that actually is, if you were to rewind the season of January back then was spring.
Yeah.
So the January, first off, wasn't even January. January was the 13th month. And then, which is why, actually, well, January was technically the 11th, but the 11th and 12th were removed. And then the 11th was brought back in. That's why December, that's actually 10, the 10th month.
Yes.
And so things are a little wonky with the calendar. But if you were to go back in time to when this calendar was actually started, you would have seen spring aligning with New Year's
That makes
Um,
sense. It always resonated with me like that. And I also think personally for anybody, you can start the new year on your birthday. Like that's your personal new year.
that's a fact. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that I always wonder if like spirits perceive time. Or like, you know how like there's the intelligent spirits, maybe they do, but not the residual ones or ones that are stuck or like in that loop.
Yep. Great segue here, talking about time. Do you think the 3 a.m. veil is because most people go to sleep at 10 and REM starts 5 hours or so and the collective consciousness creates energy?
Ooh.
Um, it's a good thought. I don't think that I don't think I could go either way on that. Because I don't know that 3 a.m. is the spot, right? Like,
I feel like it's a collective thing that we've chosen. So many people have been like, 3 a.m. I woke up. And then after 100 years, we're all like, yeah, 3 a.m. Because you can be somewhere else. You can be, because I know Damien is in the other side of the pond, as they say. And so
yeah.
it's almost 3 a.m. there. But I think it's just that number too.
Well, but so I've thought about that too, right? Like my brain process, like, oh, well, it's not 3 a.m. everywhere at the same time, so that doesn't work. But you do have an entire belt of latitudinal
Mm,
time, right? You have effectively 1/24th of the world in that slide,
true.
in that scale,
True.
right?
So this
So,
can be some of that.
and when you're dealing with 6-7 billion people, that's a pretty significant amount of people that are entering, to his point, REM sleep
Yeah,
around that
makes
time.
sense.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think I also do believe that the idea that the veil is somehow lighter at night has more to do with sleep deprivation more than anything else, to be completely honest. We've all been in situations where we've been just so bone dead tired that we've heard things, seen things, or anything like that. Um, it's it's a situation to me where I think that there's potentially some false positives, right? Where if I were to get up and work especially if we want to like bring it back to when the idea that 3 a.m. was the witching hour, or 2 a.m. was the witching hour, going back to when we were agrarian, right? Like we were farmers,
Yeah.
getting up at six, somewhere between 5 and 6 in the morning to be able to tend to livestock, tend to the farm, get everything
Mhm.
done. And we were in more of a circadian rhythm where we were actually getting up and going down with the sun. And
Mhm.
so the idea that if you got up at 5 a.m. and you worked your ass off on a farm for 5 to 7 hours, right? And then you started to cool your heels and started to do less stressful things. So exhaustion setting in, and then you're stretching it even further to 3 a.m., 2 hours before you're supposed to get up. Do that 2 or 3 times and see how perceptive and
You start
trustworthy.
hallucinating.
Yeah, your senses are
Yeah.
going to become less trustworthy, right? So I find it very hard to believe that if we were in a system, right, where the paranormal exists, ghosts are real, I don't think the sun and the moon's going to affect the energy, right? Like, I don't feel like that would be that impactful. And if anything, I would think that during the day, there is more energy, there is more consciousness, there is more attention. Um, so I would think that from a investigation or ghost hunting or spiritual perspective, um, time of day really shouldn't matter much. We're
Yeah,
the
well, I
one.
feel like the other theory too, especially at that time of, night, it's like it's very quiet. There's less
Yeah,
people
there we
out
go.
about. I know, right? I love it.
Jokes on
Um,
y'all.
there's less people out and about, there's less things, and obviously now we have cell phones and we have computers, but
Yeah.
think about it, if you were awake at that time, you're just kinda like staring at the wall. You're kind of like just sitting in this space where you can hear and maybe see things that you wouldn't normally experience. That's
Uh,
that's how I feel.
Yeah, Denise is echoing that here with it's in her opinion that it's
Yes,
simply
yes,
quieter at
Denise,
night.
right? That's just
You notice
quieter.
more. Yeah, so you're able to center more.
Yeah.
And that's entirely possible, right? Like, um, so it is interesting to me because I have a really hard time believing that the threshold between here and there, right, is somehow contingent on a time zone.
I think it's all personal. I don't think it's an actual time. I think it depends on, what you do. If you are meditating grounded, if you're more perceptive, and things come up in people's lives. Sometimes you're more stressed out and you can't see anything like or connect to that side, or maybe you can, maybe too much.
Yeah, and to Casey's
Denise
point too,
says,
I think that's really what I was trying to say was like your brain just is going to send
yes,
false positives at some point, right? It might be quieter and everything like that, and if you're used to having to stay hyper vigilant for a significant period of time, and you don't have any of those signals or instances or information coming to you that you do throughout the day, you might start triggering false positives, right? You might hear footsteps that you don't hear, those pipes creaking in your house, instead of it just sounding like a pipe creaking at noon, now sounds like a footstep at midnight, right?
yeah.
And so it's just these weird that kind of weird delineation between how much of it is our body being faulty equipment and it actually being real, right?
I could see some of that. Yeah, that's why it's so cool to listen to everybody's perspectives and opinions and experiences. And you can really get, because once you experience something that someone's talking about, then you can understand it. Because if you haven't experienced it, then you wouldn't understand. I
Yeah.
don't know. That was a little off topic, but I just felt it just came to my head.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great example. Farmers were all very cyclical when it came to the moon. Um, One of the most interesting archaeological finds that I find terribly interesting is the proposed Uriel machine. And I
Uriel?
believe Scotland, yeah. So it's a book in the Bible, right? You go back and Uriel came down and
Oh, Uriel, the archangel.
angel he came down and showed oh my God, wasn't Job, um, wasn't Jacob. Stacy, you know who I'm talking about. Please help me out here. Um, Euro came and visited him before the Great Tribulation and the Great Flood, and built this dome and built this facility that could actually allow him to track the stars and skies and moon and everything like that. To
Oh,
know when to plant, to know when to harvest, to know when to, and to really gave him the first tangible
telescope?
form of his almanac,
Oh,
effectively,
okay.
right? Because the flood was coming and everything was like that. Um, the world was going to get thrown off, but you still needed a way to track it. And so, boom, you have your Earl's machine, which actually allowed humanity to become uh, reattuned with the Earth cycles, right? And so, just kind of an interesting story there. All
Well,
right,
it's
Denise.
even just this day and age too now, they say people who work the graveyard shift and stuff like that, they can have, not that they have health problems, but they can get less sleep. It's a proven fact that, because I've done it, I worked in the middle of the night and I noticed that it was harder. And now I do a morning job and I get regular sleep, like the circadian rhythms. It helps your health.
Yeah. So I will say this. It is I'm sorry guys. I'm struggling a little bit here with the chats because I feel like there's three different conversations happening in the chat right now, and I'm really trying to keep up with what we're talking about and what you guys are talking about in there. So I apologize for that. And the whole thing with I don't know where Wojo is, but love you, bud. Oh, there he is. Um, is that shirt a rental? No, 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 no. It's my shirt. Why? Does it not fit me well? I feel like I'm self-conscious now. Does the shirt
Oh,
not
you
look good
look,
on live? What's going on?
oh, it looks good.
Um, yeah, Damien, I'm telling you, when I started this show and said I'm running out of gas, I genuinely meant it. My brain cage is rattling in a not good way right now. All right, Denise, bringing us back to superstitions. Many were conditioned to be afraid of the dark because one was supposed to stay close to home for safety. What better way to teach the ghosts and monsters lurk in real dangers for nocturnal animals, robbers, etc. But hits home more create unspoken horrors. Yeah, I so yes and no, and I think yeah, Wojo, you got me all messed up now. Now I'm just gonna go white shirt. Fine, there you go. There you go.
Hey,
The sleeves were a rental.
You had a beater on. I was like, what are you doing?
No, I don't know. No,
I know. I
don't like the tank tops.
Like, it's summertime in here.
Well, I mean, we've had a summer, which I don't even know what the proper term for it anymore is. We used to be able to call it Indian summer, which I'm sure
just
is
call it a long ass summer.
Well, so yeah, Wojo. But no, well, because it refers to that whole like kind of restart. Because we had a frost, we had some really cold days, and then all of a sudden it's 70, 80 degrees again. But yeah, to Denise's point, you know, the fear of the dark comes from unknown predators, right? Like, and the desire to be more reliant on our hearing and our gut instincts when vision becomes a problem, right? When we're not able to see to our standard, right? Like in the dark, we're not able to perceive as much visually, so we start relying on other senses that we might not be as attuned with or as trained with, and so you know those false positives can kick in again. Oh yeah.
There you go. Yeah. You know, it's funny for me. I'm either like I'll be a night person for 2-3 years, and then I'm a morning person. I think it's because I'm a Sagittarius. I'm like all the things.
Yeah, same. You and I are in the same boat on that.
Yeah, because it's like it goes in cycles. So I appreciate.
I think we're less than a week apart, aren't we?
We're our birthday's the same day, isn't it? That's what Kim said. Our birthday was the same.
Oh shit!
Day.
I think it is. We
have the same day birthday.
We do. We have the same birthday. Yeah.
That's right.
I forgot about that. Yeah, we do. No, because we were talking about it last year.
I know. It's so funny, and it falls on the Friday the 13th this year too.
Does it really?
Yeah. We're gonna win some.
We got to do something good for this one.
Yeah.
What do you guys think we should do? Friday the 13th. Oh,
yeah,
Wojo.
Sagittarius, babe. Yeah.
Less than a week, baby.
Sagittarius.
We got a 5-day difference there. Let me see. There's also some way of thinking that those who are more likely to prefer nights were guards from the village at night. That makes sense.
Some past life energy.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that honestly I'd like to learn a little bit more and maybe get a little more exposure to, because like the whole past life regression thing, I've had a very judgmental relationship with, to be completely honest. And I think it had more to do with me being a bit judgy of the people that were talking about it, not necessarily the theory.
Yeah, you have to look at it from different sources too. I really, really love Dolores Cannon. I don't know if you ever heard of her. She does QHT, quantum healing hypnosis therapy. She created that, and she puts people in, you know, a certain state of hypnosis. And she literally, her books are amazing.
What's her last name?
Dolores Cannon. She sadly passed away, but she's like a pioneer of this tapped knowledge of, I feel like it's a lot to do with past lives. I have I wish I had my book available. It's called Convoluted Universe.
I see it here. Yeah.
Convoluted Universe. I read, she has like 2 or 3 of them. Oh my gosh. Like some of the stuff is really out there, but when you're reading, I'm like, dude, I resonate with all this information, because a lot of these people start saying things that they would have no knowledge of. It's extremely interesting. And I feel like it's a good source for past life stuff. Right? Huh. She's awesome.
Okay.
But yeah, and also, you know, I've had a past life regression from one person, and it was all right. And I think I should do it again with someone else. I always feel like you should do it with multiple different people or whatever you're trying to do, because that way you don't write it off.
Well, I mean, but also that is a scientific approach to a very pseudoscience
Yeah.
experience, right? Like, that's it kind of goes to that whole like, all right, let's see if we can repeat the experiment and get the same result. So, although we don't have a scientific method of the experiment itself,
Right.
we can still conduct it in a very credible or potentially credible way by testing multiple avenues and multiple people to see if we get the same result. Um,
It's so true, and not only that, if you don't even believe in past life, your ancestors are still living through you in your blood. And so that is kind of like a form of past lives in a way because your ancestors, your great 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 grandfather's DNA is still in you. Like
so you're talking more like a mimetic legacy, like where you have mimetic
kind of,
knowledge?
yeah, and I feel like you can tap into, some of what their traumas and their things in their lives that they had to deal with on a daily basis that may you trigger into your own lives, but you're not dealing with that. It's a whole kind of other thing, but it is to do with kind of a past life situation. It's
Hey,
extremely
Crystal. Now, I will say this: their traumas can stay in their
yeah,
past.
well, of course, but
My
all right.
ancestors provided me with enough of my own trauma that I don't need to start tackling theirs. Uh,
No, totally, but you can heal a lot of your family line with, reflecting on it and looking into it. It's cool because I did this shamanic work and we worked with our ancestors a lot. And I never worked with my ancestors before that ever. And now that I did it, it had a lot of great impact on my life. Just learning
I
about your
feel like
family.
you probably have less alcoholics in your lineage than mine.
Well,
Um,
I have a good amount, but I feel like we all do.
all right. Are y'all bringing any new equipment to the Vermont Ghost Hunt this year? Yeah. So Matt actually has a couple of new pieces of equipment that he wants to bring up that he's very eager to kind of bust out up in Vermont. Julie and I were actually just talking before we went
Yeah.
live some of the things that she's picked up. Um, the wife and I are constantly buying regrettable equipment. Um, so we'll likely have something new. I do have two things that I did buy that are not ghost hunted related, but I did buy a pumpkin spigot and a crock pot. So
Nice.
chances are we're going to have some warm cider all night available to the folks that are up there because it's supposed to be 30 friggin' degrees. And then we're also going to have a pumpkin full of adult beverages that you'll be able to just grab the spigot on. Those are the pieces of equipment I'm excited for on the Vermont trip. For some of us, it is an absolute investigation. For some of us, it is just a night to go out and hang out with your friends and kind of cut loose in a haunted location and just, yeah. Oh, Denise, she's heading over to Whitehall before we go. I will tell you,
That's cool.
Denise, for the past 2 years, I'm a smoker. I go out back behind the kitchen of Wilson every year to smoke. And so throughout the evening, I'll go out there and I'll hear fisher cats, I'll hear mountain lions or bobcats or whatever are out there and everything. And every single time I've been up there, there is something in those woods. I don't think you need to bring Sam Squanch with you.
Sam Scramps. I like that. Sam Scramps.
Sam Squanch.
Yeah.
Um, I think they're already there. Um, because not only the random friggin' dogs we had. Um, yeah, Denise and I were walking. I can't remember. I think we were walking away from the house or walking to the house. Um, about like 9:30, and just a pack of dogs showed up,
Shapeshifters. Those
just
weren't
out of
dogs.
nowhere. Like
Those
three or
weren't
four of them
dogs.
just showed up. I am not a fan if they're shapeshifters. I know too much lore around
I know.
skinwalkers and things like that to be comfortable with anything that can change shape. And I was raised very much with Celtic superstition, so nothing that can change shape can be trusted. Um, yeah, well, yeah, we are the inheritors of the victories of our ancestors. That is true. Um, there's actually some Stacy, at one point you and I got to talk completely different sidebar about the different genetic markers that actually the Black Plague theoretically, and it's becoming less and less theory now that the CDC has released Black Plague 4 study to private industry, that the Black Plague actually seemed to target specific genetic markers.
Someone
And
said that that could be true with COVID as well.
yeah. But it gives it more of an air of
Which is
potentially.
crazy, which is scary, which also
Oh,
the Black Plague always reminds you of, like, the gas that the aliens released and got
yeah.
everybody. I
Well,
know that's not true, but
there's some. That's a whole other episode where we can talk about the Grim Reapers. We can talk about the fact that it looked more like a sprayer wand,
right.
and than anything else, with the arc of the stream representing the actual scythe itself. The fact that it was always going over, like, the sightings of Grim Reapers were always over harvestable foods. And
So
like,
crazy.
there's
It's so
so
much,
much
and it's also
about the Grim
scary to
Reaper.
think about that the technology they have nowadays, it's like with sicknesses and stuff too.
We can
I'm
do a conspiracy podcast, talk about big pharma and how the fact that they're trying to kill us,
all of a
and it's
sudden our
not
shit gets
actually
cut off.
a conspiracy. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
It existed prior, but not nearly at the levels that we know now. But
But also not even just that, like, just the technology gives off radiation, like our cell phones and the EMFs and the computers and the microwaves, all that, like, not even, like, bacteria or like, disease, but talking about, like, that vibration.
microplastics,
Yeah.
microplastics.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, there's a shitload of things I could talk about on that side, and about how, especially in the United States, the fact that I think the last report was like 17% of the foods that are available in United States grocery stores are banned in most European countries because they don't meet food standards. But,
Right.
uh,
Food is
don't want to go
medicine.
on.
That's, like, the basic. I always every time I eat anything, I can feel it, especially as I get older. It's a blessing and a curse because when you're younger, you're like, "I can eat everything. I can eat 2 pizzas and a whole tub of ice cream, be fine." But now it's like, "Oh, man, you eat that, you feel sick."
Stacey, that's actually part of the study. Um, there are genetic
Ooh,
markers.
wow.
Yeah, no, there's genetic markers for a lot of
So if
this
your
stuff, and
ancestors survived the Black Plague, you're immune to cancer. That's fascinating.
yeah, so um, there is a genetic marker. I can't remember what number it is in the DNA sequence. But if both of your parents have it, you won't have it.
Oh, wow.
But if two of your grandparents had it, you will. And it's effectively the immunity gene. Like, cancer can't touch you. They've proven that, like, AIDS can't touch you with this. Like, your immune system is just so resilient that you are effectively, like, bulletproof when it comes to illnesses.
Mm.
But yeah, let me see here. I'm in the psychological development disability field. My clients' base are the long-term human drug studies. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's not always great. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, the listeria recalls, which is wild to me.
Sometimes it's like
Uh,
I wanna be a lightitarian. You ever heard of that? Like, don't eat it and all that. I don't think we'd make it, but, um, I was watching that movie Platform. Have you seen that movie?
no, no, I haven't.
Oh, it's a really creepy movie on Netflix. There's a 1 and 2, but it's, like, based of like, it's a jail, and they bring the food down on each level, and then the lower levels don't get any food, and it's a crazy movie. But I was just thinking
Oh,
about
so
that.
it's like Snowpiercer, but in a
Kind
building.
of, yeah. I mean, yeah, totally in a different form,
Yep.
but it's interesting to see what the body does when it doesn't have food or whatever. Our bodies are very fascinating, and I feel like it's also about, like, resilience, like you were saying with the
Mhm.
being you can't get sick from certain things or your immune system's strong. It's just
Well, I mean, it's hilarious. Is Kim can attest to this. There's just certain things that I've done and experienced that just don't make sense. Um, like, I had a case of strep at one point that I went to a job interview that morning, got the job, went to the hospital later that day, and they hospitalized me for 3 days.
Oh,
Um,
no.
because I was so bad, but I didn't realize I was that bad. And then I was unconscious, and Kim had to take care of me for 7 days as I
Oh,
went through the
no.
antibiotics. And I mean, like other times, like my stomach, iron trap, doesn't matter. I've accidentally ate month-old leftovers, like, and nothing. And so there's definitely something to it on the resilience.
Right, and it's also where you're at too, like, you can be exposed to something and not get it, but then you become vulnerable and then you're exposed. It's there's so many different things that could play into it.
And to tie it back into the paranormal,
Yeah,
I have the same perspective about negative haunted areas. And
100%.
so
I believe
the
that.
more you can absolutely have a strong immune system to the negative energies in a place. And as long
Yes,
as you don't feed it and engage it, like when you get the sniffles and you're like, oh shit, I think I'm sick. And then
right.
sure enough, you become sick, right? To me, I get the sniffles and I'm like, I'm fucking fine. And then a few hours later, I am fine, right? And
Yeah,
so the paranormal, like negative,
energies, yeah.
negative energies and things like that to me in the same way. If I even get an indicator of a negative energy, I'm like, this isn't a negative energy. I'm just gonna back off. Like we did it at Heart Stuff the other day. Like
Yeah,
we both got that vibe where it was like, all right, now's not the time.
right,
Neither of us were like, oh, this is hostile. Other people probably would have
right.
taken it as hostile. Um, but yeah, that's
People always ask me too, they're like, "You go to these crazy places and you don't think you're gonna have an entity attachment or anything like that?" I'm like, most of the time that never happens. I usually, if I get an entity attachment, it will be from like I'll be at the grocery store or like just like regular things,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
normal
yeah.
stuff. Like I'll have a
Like when your guard is down, right?
right when you're not
Um,
expecting it. I'm like, and it's rare for me, but it happens. We're all human.
well, and Casey, this is a really good thing too. And I think the more that you explore the paranormal, the more you actually do things, the more you actually engage, the more you're going to be able to actually prepare yourself to have those walls up, to not allow any of your own stuff. Because like we're all going through stuff, right? We're all going through negativity. We're all dealing with our own personal journeys and stuff that
Yeah.
can suck sometimes, right? And for me, my perspective really is when I go into that, all of that needs to be checked at the door. I need to be the version of me that is settled, right? Like that I'm in control of all aspects of my energy being output, right? And so when something does latch on and gets negative, right? Being able to stop the spigot of energy from you to that is the most important thing. And this is just my opinion, right? This is just one person's opinion. Um, So when they are feeding on that negativity and you engage with that, you're almost giving them license to draw on it even more. And so to me, getting rid of that pipeline of negativity in a space that is negative is critical. And so, the more you engage, the more you actually do stuff and really I do hope you come out to more events. Um, the more you're going to be able to see that a lot of your own mentality and a lot of your own energy is what's being reflected back.
I agree with you 100%. And also having the moment where if you're feeling this is consuming you and you feel like it's yourself being like, wait a second, this isn't me. Like kind of
Yeah.
like a third person view, like you're looking down at yourself, like, wait, okay, and try to reframe it and not go tunnel vision into it and
Hmm.
don't let it consume you. I feel
Yeah.
like it's important.
Yeah.
Too much
And
getting said.
Crystal, more importantly than when you encounter a negative spirit to cut ties and to cut that energy link, it's so much more important in our everyday lives, right? Like if you're dealing with somebody that is just like down and
Right,
negative and wants to drown you in their own shit and mire, like it is super important to like break that off and set an appropriate boundary so
right.
that you don't get brought down, right? Like people from New York, notoriously negative, horrible people that no one likes. And you just have to break tie with them. And anytime they try to reach out, you just delete that comment and move on. um, that may have seemed oddly targeted. Um, because it was. I love you, Denise.
Stop.
But no, like you were all right. I got to put that up so everybody knows that it was all in good fun. No, like you really do have to kind of set that boundary in both, you know, the paranormal and in everyday life. Like you can't
Right.
have just the constant drip of acid on your happiness without it making you unhappy.
Right.
I guess Rob's not coming.
Oh, that's okay. He's partying
It's
it
his
up.
birthday. It's his birthday.
Time, man.
It's 10 o'clock on his 75th birthday. We can't expect him to stay
What?
up this
He's not
late.
that old. He don't look that old.
I may have just said that in case he was watching to fire him up.
Okay, because I was like, I don't think he's that old, man.
I don't think he's watching.
No, that's all good.
He'll probably go back and watch it and then send me some cuss words tomorrow. But no, we are at the 10 o'clock mark and we do have a show coming up behind us. So I don't want to spill too much over on their side. I also have a conversation to have with Mike, or Danger, as most of you guys know him, over for the soiree. We have the portal that we have to pound out all the details there. But guys, thank you so much. Julie.
Thank you. Another good night, another wonderful chat. Here, get moderated. Next week, getting a little wild. Halloween.
All day. All right, guys. Stay blessed. Have a good night.